Since one of the fundamental beliefs or tenets of the Mandel enterprise is it's all about who, then you want to devote your efforts, your thinking, your share of mind, and your resources to who is the who. That is, the people that are going to be influential in Jewish education. Mort and his brothers developed a very successful, huge company from a very small beginning. I don't know if it's apocryphal, but maybe literally out of the trunk of somebody's car. And along the way, Mort was a genius at devising the systems of how you manage an ever-growing enterprise and keep it on track and keep focused. And the challenge always is when you can't control everything, when you grow from your product line being displayed in a trunk of a car to an auto shop repair guy, to people watching, looking at your inventory in a catalog and then online and over the web, you have to have systems. You can't control it anymore, but you want to train people to do their best in presenting the company and its offerings. And along the way, Mort hit upon the idea of getting advice from other smart people, and he tells the story of how for some time he and his management team at Premier got advice from Peter Drucker. And the impression I have is that they had a kind of floating seminar where I guess they visited with Drucker, or Drucker came to Cleveland, I don't really know what, and talked management. And Mort took lessons from that. One of the lessons that he's busy teaching us now is that you put your best person on your biggest opportunity. And that's just a very nice way of capturing another side of the aphorism of it's all about who. It's that focused on people. The first time I had a serious talk with Mort, I was pretty young at the staff at the Federation at the time, and Mort was a past board chair, and we had never spent any time together, which was normal. So he invited me over to Premier's headquarters for lunch, and it was a typical Mandel lunch. And he started me on actually what you just asked, what's your history? And I did a formal interview with Mort, and he's an excellent interviewer, and he probably knew everything he needed to know about me by the end of the hour. I got the job, and one of the perks of getting the job is you work with the past board chairs. I became the director in December of '83, and in 1984, Mort was chairing an international conference on Jewish education. I think it was called the World Conference on Jewish Education here in Jerusalem. And I think Seymour was involved, Seymour of blessed memory was involved in designing the conference, and a number of the people that are advisors today were active then. This was when Mort was active with the Jewish Agency. So he said to me, you probably ought to come to this conference on Jewish education, which I did. And when we came home, Mort and I had another one of these famous breakfasts where he said, I've been giving some thought, and I don't know why we in Cleveland shouldn't try to change things. We shouldn't just let these things roll along. You'll frequently find the brothers saying to us, Mort in particular, this is my America, this is my Cleveland, and I have responsibility for it, and I'm going to make it better. In classic Mandel style, the first question on the agenda was who could be our leader? And we decided to go recruit Chuck Ratner to be the leader. This eventually became, in Cleveland, the Commission on Jewish Continuity, which led to a major transformation of our whole Jewish education process as a Jewish community, as a federation, to the ultimate redesign of the Bureau of Jewish Education. And here we are now, 22 years later, still working off the basic model that Mort and I talked about at that first breakfast. We decided to focus on who could be the educational leaders in the congregations and elsewhere. We decided to focus on the quality of day school teachers, the quality of supplemental school teachers. And so our core elements in the Commission on Jewish Continuity became focused on how to prepare and then place senior educators in the various synagogues where there weren't full-time positions, and then how to do in-service training better for the day school people and the supplemental school people. So you could say the binding element was the focus on people. Resources are ultimately finite. The question arises of which people do you want to invest in? Where on the hierarchy of leadership? And we tend to gravitate towards the top, because if we have finite resources, then we want to focus on the people at the highest levels in the hierarchy who will then affect others, as opposed to going to, say, a broad stretch at the base. It's important. Somebody has to feed the hierarchy, but we have found that we're more successful with our focus on the folks at the top. Another aspect of the brothers' ambition is they want to change the world. They see universities and schools all as mechanisms to change the world. I think what separates the Mandel Foundation from many others is that they don't stop at the university's border saying, well, we're interested in strengthening the university as a university, and that's sufficient. When the Mandels are involved, it's because they're thinking about what the university's graduates are going to do. And in particular, when they get involved with a particular thing, such as the Mandel Center for Nonprofit Organizations or the Mandel School of Applied Social Sciences, they actually want to know what the students are going to do when they're out in the real world. And there's endless conversations that Mort will have with the deans or the program director. But what are the kids doing, and what can we do to make them more effective when they're doing it, and how are we following them? It's not sufficient success that they graduate. We don't always know what needs to be done to advance Jewish education in terms of pedagogy, curriculum, textbooks, theory, what have you. What we are pretty convinced about is that if we're able to introduce very smart people who have been helped to harness their intellect in certain identified ways with vision and knowledge, that they will figure out what to do when the time comes for them to lead. So I think that the fundamental commitment to the Jerusalem Fellows was how to prepare very promising people in the diaspora to become Jewish educational leaders, and to try to accelerate their growth into those leaders by giving them an intensive immersion in theory and vision and text and all kinds of tools here in Jerusalem that they could then take to their home communities and invigorate Jewish education. And when one looks at who the graduates are, the Jerusalem Fellows from the early years, you begin to see people who in fact did become leaders. The usual example we like to point to is Seymour Kapelowitz, who was actually trained for leadership in South Africa. And then after conditions in South Africa changed, he became available to us in Cleveland, and he now is the Chief Educational Officer of the Jewish community of Cleveland, only because he was a Jerusalem Fellow and became known to us as a Jerusalem Fellow. So when you had the title Jerusalem Fellow in your resume, it was a marker that said, here's somebody apart from the average group of Jewish educators that you should pay attention to. When Mort and his brothers were younger, it was all about the melting pot. We all brought our differences, and America was this great furnace that just melted everything down, and out popped forged, bona fide Americans. And you were to lose your otherness in pursuit of the American identity. Today, and I think the Mandels are to be credited for not losing their Jewish identity, even as they forged their American identities, and they're kind of the poster kids for what America can be about, which is where people from all kinds of different walks of life and backgrounds come together and make for great contributions to American society. At the same time that they focused on preserving the American dream and helping others enjoy it, they never forgot that they were Jewish. And it's just a very strong part of their identity. Their father was a learned man, and he succeeded in imparting this Jewish pride to his sons, which they have carried forward. And so they've always had a special interest in Jewish identity and the perpetuation of Jewish values and ideals. And I think Mort's commitment to education, again, in Jewish education, is simply a vehicle towards the larger goal of continuing our values and our tradition, because it's been so enriching for him and his brothers' lives that they feel that there's a great opportunity here for another generation to feel just as rich as they do in that sense. And of course, they're also the generation that saw anti-Semitism up close and personally. They saw it in the streets of Cleveland and elsewhere. They watched it in the world as expressed through World War II and the Holocaust. And they had the joy of watching the State of Israel arise. Today, Mort and the brothers are really, they've really been able to refine how they want to display their commitment or convey their commitment, because you now have active investment going on in Israel by the Mandel family. And then we have the tremendous development of the Foundation for Education and related activities. Mort and the brothers are irrepressible optimists. Mort, the first among equals in terms of optimism. So he's genetically hardwired to be optimistic about the future. So that's the first lens that he's looking at the country through. Second, you have a lot of smart people here. I get around a bit in the Jewish world in terms of internationally, and of course I get around the United States. And we have a lot of smart people, but this is a small country, and you're just stuffed with smart, hardworking, intelligent, dedicated, creative folks. I'd like to tell you that there's a master plan for what we're going to do in Israel. But in fact, it appears to me that we evolve. And we evolve through a combination of the kind of people that we have emerging in the Mandel Foundation process here in Israel. I'm talking about our professional team. And we evolve through opportunities that come our way. We began very narrowly with a definition that we were going to intervene in Jewish education in the diaspora, using Israel as a rich resource base, and that we were going to make a contribution to the public education in Israel, since it was the largest gathering of Jewish students in the world. They're here. The majority of Jewish children are here. now, I think, in Israel. And so if we wanted to ensure a great future for them, we had to improve education in Israel. But along the way, through Mort's contacts, we began to get requests to take the knowledge we had of transforming leadership to apply to related fields in social welfare, in ministries, the education ministry itself, then the army, and then people who are preparing themselves to do work in the periphery of Israel. And most recently now we're doing this kind of work in the Negev. The foundation is working now in the Bedouin community. We've had members of the Druze community in our programs, as well as members of the Arab Israeli community and the like. And I know that there's been tremendous discussions in the school around times of tension, such as the Mitzav, which I think has probably gone a long way to helping our program think about who our students are and the roles that they play in society. One thing I'm sure about, the foundation is equally concerned about all sectors of Israeli society. Equally concerned in that we want to advance Israeli society, and we don't discriminate between advancing Israeli Jewish society versus Israeli Arab society, Druze society, Bedouin society, or whatever. I think we're fully committed and proud of our students as they go forth and do their thing in their various communities. And then you wake up one day and you realize that there are Mandel graduates just spread throughout the nonprofit world in Israel, as well as the governmental world, as well as the education system. And today the Mandel name is a pedigree for excellence. I believe we've developed quite a powerhouse here in Israel, and I think we need to begin to bring that power to bear on the ground in North America. And the most important thing we can do is to start developing talent in North America in the unique way that we can do it, which means we have to take what we've learned here and introduce it into the American educational scene. Our presence in North America today, outside of Cleveland, is limited in the area of Jewish education. We have beachheads in some important national Jewish institutions. But I believe that over the next decades, we'll eventually develop as powerful a teaching capacity in North America as we have here in Israel. I think the talent pool is there. I think we haven't organized ourselves to pursue our agenda. I think we have a lot to offer the North American Jewish community based upon what we've learned here about how to affect change, which is ultimately what we're all about in the foundation, how to change the world. And so I believe that in the next 2 decades, we'll be putting as much thinking and effort into North America as we are in Israel, because North America represents the other great center of Jewish life over the next 20 years. And there's a lot at risk. And there's a lot of changes that are needed. And while we may not know exactly what the changes should be, we know that talented people are going to be needed to figure it out, and that's what we do best. So I think that we're going to become much more engaged in impacting the development of civil society. Right now, we're focused in a major way on the civil service of Israel. But I believe the future development of society here is going to be through the action of volunteer citizens. And a reduction in the role of government. And I believe the foundation will find itself seeking opportunities to identify that leadership, develop that leadership, encourage that leadership, and then, because we don't abandon our grads, ultimately nourish that leadership in much the same way we've been doing it in the civil service world. I've had the benefit of learning from Mort now for 23 years as the Chief Professional Officer in Cleveland, in addition to whatever else I've been doing. And Mort is always teaching. He can't help himself, whether he's doing it consciously or unconsciously. And so the Mandels, I don't think, see problems. I think they just see challenges that you can figure out how to overcome them. And if it doesn't appear to you today that you quite know how to do it, maybe tomorrow, maybe the next day, but you don't have a license to stop. You've got to keep working on that challenge. And then there's this whole concept of looking beyond the training to the actual impact, the actual changing of the world. It's not unique, I'm sure, to the Mandels, but I don't hear it a lot of other places. And in the social service world or the world of philanthropy, often the expectations are much more limited because it's harder to measure the change. But Mandel is pushing you out there to do it.